Yvette Walker left a failed marriage to a man with bipolar disorder, but emerged to find joy greater than she had hoped for. Her story will excite you with the truth of how to find that everlasting joy in your life. Stay tuned.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Yvette Walker is an author, speaker, journalist, and educator who knows how to experience joy in all circumstances. We are so happy that she has joined us today on Never Ever Give Up Hope. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'm very happy to be here.
So let's start with your story. Tell us your story, starting with your marriage or before, and just
Mhm.
share what you would like to share with the audience.
Well, my marriage was certainly a marriage of love, and I am a kind of person. In fact, I had a sign up in my college dorm room that said "hopelessly romantic," because I am a hopeless romantic, and I
Ah,
always knew that I would kind of find my perfect person and get married, and that happened. But no marriage is perfect, and I had a difficult marriage. I didn't know it was going to be difficult in the beginning, but over time it was. And choosing joy is a real choice. And when you are in the midst of something difficult, sometimes you cannot see that joy. So with my marriage, I married a wonderful man who, at the time, we both thought he had Epstein-Barr syndrome, which is
mm-hmm,
chronic fatigue.
mm-hmm.
And that's what he'd been diagnosed with. Although later I found out that he'd been diagnosed a couple of times. I think he was misdiagnosed. Ultimately, we'd been married for about a year, and he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is pretty different than Epstein-Barr.
Right, right.
But he did have the kind that was the depressive syndromes, with bipolar 2, where you're tired a lot. So I can see why maybe he thought it was chronic fatigue. But it turned into him not being able to work for the majority of our marriage,
Mm,
just being very fatigued and tired, and just not doing much to take care of himself. And I tried to be the supportive wife. We were married in the Catholic Church, and I definitely believed my vows, and thought that I would always, be married to him. But
mm-hmm,
over time, I found that I was probably enabling him, because I was just
mm,
trying to do things for
mm-hmm.
him, and I was trying to be, again, that supportive, loving wife. Um, but after we were married for 13 years, and I'm going to say he worked the first three. So after 10 years of him just kind of, being tired and kind of moping a bit with bipolar disorder, you can experience mania, even if you're bipolar 2.
Okay.
So kind of like clockwork, a couple times a year, he had manic episodes where you kind of have flights of fancy. I learned from learning about this disorder. I got my own checking account. I just wanted, because there there
Mm-hmm.
are there are cases of people, particularly with bipolar 1, that have mania most of the time, with lots of issues, gambling and running through money. He did not do that. Very fortunate, and he also did not have an alcohol problem or a drug problem, which a lot of times you begin to self medicate, because you're just
Right.
you're just not a happy person Fortunately, he did not do that. But but he did have some behavior, and I've learned in the different forums, support forums, that you see this too. Acting out a little bit, or having extramarital affairs and things like that. I think a lot of people who suffer from this, and it's not everybody. Let me just be honest, it's not everybody,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
think sometimes people are just trying to find anything to feel. Now, we were probably, we're they say opposites attract. I think that we did have some of that, and ultimately, I had to leave the marriage, and I have to say that I felt that I failed the marriage. I felt very
Hmm.
guilty about not
Of
being able to
course.
make the marriage work, and then also I feel that, again, I was enabling him. I was allowing him to not be his best self. It's interesting that when we did get divorced, and that was difficult because he did not want to separate, he did not want a divorce. I didn't divorce him until he had successfully gotten disability, because
Hmm.
I was the one that was working, and so that means I was the one that had the medical
Of
insurance, and
course.
I just could not leave him without any medical insurance. But he was able to get disability, and he had his own medical. I felt much more comfortable about that because I wanted to make sure he would continue to take care of himself. But it was difficult, and I will say that those of you out there who have experienced divorce, or separation, or maybe going through it now, it's a hard decision. And
Hmm.
there were times when I, would go to the attorney, and there's paperwork and things that you have to fill out. And every time I would have to go, it was just another step. And I will say, because I am a woman of faith, I would say, and I would have to say, God, am I doing the right thing? I think
Hmm.
that we always have those internal questions. Am I doing the right thing? And I really thought that I was. And so after that, I was in a funk myself. And I remember a friend of mine that I'd known for years. We went to elementary school together. We were talking on the phone one time, and she said to me, Yvette, you sound depressed. And I had never really thought of me being depressed before. And I'm thinking to
Interesting.
myself,
Hmm.
yeah, right. I mean, I'm living with someone who's depressed, but I didn't really think I was. Well, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, actually. I mean, I was situationally depressed. I wasn't chemically depressed, like the brain
Right.
chemistry
Right.
like he had. But yes, you can be situationally depressed. And I would say that I was not choosing joy in those moments because I didn't know how to. I was not
Hmm.
clinging to joy. And at that time, over time, after the divorce, I was dating, and because I'm the kind of woman who loves to be in a relationship. I'm a giving person, and so I didn't see myself as being single for the rest of my life. And this was at the time in my late 40s. And ultimately, um, just to skip ahead, I did remarry to a wonderful man, someone who is great for me. But there was a time period where it was really, really tough.
Of
And
course.
in fact, I'm a podcaster. I have a podcast called Positively Joy, which has been on since 2020. But recently, I have been really feeling called to talk about this, and to talk to women who are experiencing divorce, separation, or some kind of loss in the marriage, and help them understand kind of what I went through, and that there is hope on the other side. And even if you don't want to get married again, if you do, yes, I'm a perfect example of someone having a successful second marriage later in my life. And if that's something that you want to do, I want to give you hope for that, for sure. But not everybody necessarily needs that, but you do need to be joyful. You do need to live a good life. And for me, it is my faith. So for me, it is understanding that I am loved. I am loved by
Hmm.
my husband, but I am
Hmm.
loved. And that was a big issue for me. I remember one time I was I couldn't go to sleep. I was upset. I was crying. The boyfriends weren't working out. And I just remember being up listening to K-Love, and Matthew West's song More came on about
Mm.
how you are loved. And for the first time, I understood that. And I realized that I wasn't afraid of being alone for the rest of my life. I was afraid that I'd never be loved again. And in that realization and understanding that, yes, I am loved, that, my fear went away. It really did. And I went to sleep. I was able to get a good night's sleep. That next morning, I woke up and I found myself on a journey to joy. For me, now that journey to joy is going to look different for a lot of people. For me, I did dig deeper into my faith, and I went on a journey. First of all, I stopped dating, and I stopped dating for about a year and a half, just on this self journey with my faith and understanding what it means to not be worried about loving other people or being loved by other people, but just in general being loved. For me, by my creator. But I mean, I think that even if you're not a faithful person, we are put on this earth for reasons. And I am not one to say exactly why, because I'm, who knows. But we are put on this earth by reasons, by a reason. And there's a reason that we are here. And I think that we can cling to that. Even if you don't have a religious faith, I think that you can cling to the fact that you're not here by accident.
Right.
You're not here by chance. I truly, truly believe that. The person that we are, and that we've been made to be, we are one of a kind. We lack nothing. And so I think when we think about ourselves like that and understand who we are, it will put us on that path to finding joy. Joy is not chasing things. Joy is not chasing people, which is what I think I was doing after
Mm.
marriage, trying to find that next relationship. It's not chasing substances, which unfortunately have been very, lucky not to have had an
Mhm.
issue with. It's also not chasing food. I I have had problems with food, as a lot of people have.
Right.
And so it's not chasing, and it's also really not even chasing family. This is maybe controversial, but you're not going to find true joy in your husband or your children. They can make you happy, but you've got to find true joy. For
Right.
me, it's
Right.
in my faith and it's in myself. And so once I, began down this journey and I began to learn that more and more, it was a lot easier being on my own. Now, yes, I'm an extrovert, so I love being around people. And I love friendships and I love relationships. And I was very lucky to meet my now husband, who is perfect for me. Is he perfect? No, because I'm not either, but he's perfect for me. We are equally yoked, which is a biblical term, but it just means that we're compatible. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who are not compatible with other people. They think they are. They may have similar hobbies and things like that, but there's on some kind of a level, I was going to say molecular level, but on some kind of a level, you with your partner have to be compatible. And it's again, we're very different people. He's more of a outside person. I'm more of an inside person. I love watching TV. He's not a big fan.
But
I
you
love
made it
TV and
work.
movies.
You made it
But yeah,
work.
well, yeah, but because our compatibility goes deeper than those external things.
Right.
And so, if you are going to look for that next person, you definitely need to find out what on a deeper level you agree with, and that, and that you're compatible. And so the podcast started in 2020, where I was called to speak on joy, and I really didn't know what that meant at the time. And but over time, I have learned that people are chasing this feeling. And I have a catchphrase. It's joy is not a feeling, it's faith. Now, again, for me, it's faith. For someone else, it's going to be something else. But it's not these frivolous external things that people are looking for. We're not going to be happy all the time. We were never promised that. So we're not going to be happy all the time, but we can be filled and satisfied in who we are and in the things that are important to us. And I hope that makes sense.
What would you tell the audience would be the first step if they are in a similar situation and really struggling, whether it is a bad marriage or any other type of relationship? What is the first step that they can take to see that there is an out for them,
Mhm.
a better way?
I do think that talking to others is important, someone that you trust. Sometimes it is hard for us to see what's happening within our own
Right.
ecosphere, right? Like when my friend told me you sound depressed, that shocked me. I had no idea. And so I know there's some people out there who would say I would never talk to a therapist or whatever. I think that the stigma of that is gone. I think there used to be a little bit more of a stigma than there is now. But whether it's a therapist or whether it's your minister or whoever it is, I do think that talking to someone that you trust, or maybe it is a friend, talking to someone that you trust is important to help you understand what you have one perspective being inside the relationship, but then sometimes other people can bring another perspective. And I do think whoever this person is, um you definitely have to have a trust bond with them, and they have to know you and understand you. So I think finding that person is the first step, figuring out who it is that you think will have the right motives in helping you. And I just say that because sometimes friends and family, you would think that they do, but they may have their own perspectives that's built on other baggage. So again, I think you're going to need to make a good decision on who that is. But I do think you need to look outside yourself and outside the relationship. Yeah. Now let me just point out, if it's a dangerous situation or anything like
Right.
that, you need to get out immediately. Obviously, I mean, I just let me just point that out. If it's a danger, and I'm going to say mentally, emotionally, and or physically, if the person is abusing you in any way, then that's another issue, and you must leave. But if it's a difficulty in other ways, I would say, yes, you may feel guilt like I did, particularly because my husband had an illness, and that's a real illness,
Right.
and I felt bad about it. But I also felt like I was not helping him. So these are very important and difficult issues to weigh.
So you already addressed my next question, which was how did you overcome the guilt and the self-blame?
Well, it's interesting because once I really, really in my heart and soul felt like this would be better for him, it would force him to do things. I saw that happening. So he did go back to work. Somehow now he was able to go
Hmm.
back to work. He actually remarried before I did. I have to tell you, I felt a certain way about that.
Yeah, no kidding.
um, so I said, well, okay, you're making some changes and you're able to do more now, with someone else than with me. And for whatever reason, I think that's good. I think that you have to live your life and not just, be in a bed all day and not doing anything. So what I saw happen, I didn't know how it was going to happen or what was going to happen, but what I saw happen in front of me told me that I had made the right decision. Now I will say this was not expected. We were divorced about 5 years, and he passed away. He had a heart attack on the job, and he passed
Hmm.
away. And I went to the funeral, and it was strange because I wasn't a widow, but it kind of felt like I was.
Right,
So
of
that was another set of feelings that I had to deal with. Sometimes after the divorce, there can be other feelings that you have to deal with.
course. Now, you have written more than one book, and we're going to talk about the books in the second half. But before we take a break, could you just maybe give me a very, very short recap of your books?
Absolutely. The first book, Whispering in His Ear, is a devotional where it is a set of anecdotes, stories, and then some exercises for you to look inward and think about those things. I have written a book of poetry called Lyrics from My Faith, and I have written a journal for you to find joy. And anyone can use this. It's a 6 month guided journal with prompts. The prompts, there's two different kinds of prompts. There's scripture prompts, but then there's also a prompt every week to encourage you to look around yourself and find joy. So even if you don't want to use the scripture prompts, you can use the other guided prompt. And then I like crime novels and TV shows, and so I wrote a crime novel called 60. I know. It's about a reporter. It's not me. It's based on some experiences that I have gone through as a journalist, but it's about a reporter who kind of goes back to the town where she covered a big crime, and there's lots of things waiting for her there. And so that's called 60, the number 60, SIXTY. And the part two, called Trial of the Heart, should release sometime later this year.
Well, that's definitely something to look forward to, and we will have all that contact information as well on your webpage when we share your interview. And right now we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about your website, your books, and your podcast. We'll be right back.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another: gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Yvette Walker has been sharing her story. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm sure there are many in the audience that are relating and different aspects of her story. Now, to continue, would you share your books, your journals, and your website and podcast, and what you can offer the audience that will help them, especially those who are going through similar circumstances?
Absolutely. So my podcast is called Positively Joy. And this podcast started during the pandemic in May of 2020. But I have to just really briefly tell you how we got here. So I mentioned that I started on this journey after I heard that song by Matthew West and understood that I was, really afraid of being not loved again, but I didn't have to be because God loved me. So I mentioned earlier that I had been married in the Catholic Church. I am a woman of faith, a woman of deep faith. I'm a Christian. And so I really did, I was clinging to that during this time and felt strongly that the Lord in my spirit told me that you just need to take a break now, spend some
Mm.
time with me, stop dating. And so I did. So it was about a year and a half where I just stopped the process, tried to, really kind of dive into a more spiritual relationship with the Lord. And after that, I felt in my spirit, he said, okay, it's time. You can start dating again. So I did. I went online, and the third man that I encountered is my husband today. And
Aw.
no. And I knew when I met him, I knew that this person had been sent to me by God. it took him about a year to figure that out. So we dated for a year before he proposed. But no, I knew. I really did. And so after this, this was in 2017. I began to continue down this path of trying to find a relationship with God. And I was led to this scripture verse in the Gospel of John in chapter 15, where Jesus basically says, this is how to find joy. Abide in my love and do the will of the Father, and you will be filled with a joy that completes you.
Hmm.
Now, listeners may or may not be Christian, but this was a very specific verse that I was led to, and it made a lot of sense for me. And what I have learned and what I talk about in the podcast and in my books is that we are searching to be filled and complete. We're searching for joy, for hope, for peace, but I think often we look in the wrong places. We are searching. I mean, there are people who are searching for joy in relationships or in substances or even through their families and their kids. But I have learned that, yes, all those things, well, maybe not the substances, but, your relationships, family, those are good things. But you cannot count on them to complete you, to satisfy you in a way that the world cannot do. I have found that only comes from a relationship with my Lord and Savior. And for you listening, you may have a spirituality or you may have something that you count on in this way. But I would argue that, at least I have found, that you just can't rely on physical external things to make you whole and complete.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. So I hope people can take that for themselves in whatever situation that they're in. And so I talk about that on the podcast. And in fact, this is new. This is kind of an announcement that's new to people. So I'm going to give it to you, Carol. I have learned that I really do need to speak more about what we're talking about. So in the past, I have a devotional, I have a journal about joy, and I have a companion guide. I've written some poetry, but I haven't really talked about the specifics of my marriage, my divorce,
Mm-hmm.
the guilt, the search for joy. And I have really been thinking long and hard about it, and I'm led to believe that there are a lot of women out there
Yes.
who are experiencing or have experienced what I've gone through, and I need to tell my story, and I need to give them
Yes.
some hope and some joy. So that's what I'm doing now. Same podcast, but I'm changing the focus a little bit. I'm going to focus a little bit more on what we just talked about today, actually, and that search for joy and understanding what that looks like. And it will be a solo podcast for most of the time. So it's a weekly podcast. So 3 weeks of the month, it'll just be me sharing, teaching, and then 1 week a month, I will have a guest. And I'll be very specific about choosing that guest that I think can speak to what we're talking about, because I really want to reach out to women who feel a loss in their marriage, their divorce, maybe even empty nesters who feel a loss because their kids are gone and now they don't know what to cling to. So we're going to be talking about that. It's going to be a little different, but it's still that search for joy that the Lord put me on, and that He showed me how to find it.
Especially in today's world, there is a real need. And a lot of people don't want to share what they are going through until they know someone else has.
I agree. And he's gone. He's been gone for many years now. So it wasn't that I was afraid of outing him or
Right, right.
anything, but for some reason I was keeping it in. And I think that happens a lot. It does. And I think it is maybe a little bit of that guilt or a little bit of, me. Maybe I think people will think badly of me or whatever. But I think that the people who are going through this and who understand this and who need to hear this, and I think that they definitely are out there. I have touched on this in a few of episodes of the podcast. But one woman that I talked to, she's going to be the first guest. This is going to be in the fall, in September, early October, where she had a very difficult marriage. Hers is an unusual situation because she was in an Amish community. She has since left that marriage, and we've kept in touch, and we've talked a lot about what she was going through. Very different than me, but in a way not so different. So we'll talk about that once I make this transition. For
Great.
now, I've taken a little bit of a break, so I haven't been publishing any podcast episodes for about a month. But I'll jump back in this fall, and I hope you join me. Again, it's Positively Joy. And the books that are out there certainly do touch on finding this joy, not specifically in this storyline that we've been talking about, but I think it's still very, very worthy. So I have a devotional, a 30-day devotional called Whispering in His Ear, because part of the story that we didn't get into today, because there's never enough time, is I felt like when I was a little girl, I could talk to God, and I could feel him in my spirit. But as I grew up and we get busy with the world and working and everything, I felt his voice getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and not feeling like I could really hear him anymore. And maybe that's why I felt like that I wouldn't be loved anymore, because I couldn't feel him anymore. So Whispering in His Ear talks a little bit about developing that relationship, and it is a Christian devotional, and talks about and stories. It's storytelling, anecdotes, prayer, and doing kind of an exercise that might again put you on this path to find joy. So then there's a journal called Journaling His Joy. And that just is an opportunity for you to every day and every week look around you and find joy right where you are. And I did that because I've been talking about joy for years, but I wanted to have a very specific and physical thing that people could look at and say, okay, I'm going to write this down. I can claim the joy that I have in my life, and I can remember that.
Hmm.
And I can record it and then go back to it if I get into a rough time. So that's called Journaling His Joy. But I've also started writing fiction. It is Christian fiction, so my character is a Christian woman, but she's also a journalist, and it is what we call edgy Christian fiction because it's a crime novel.
Okay.
And so that so that is called 60, the number 60, and that's been out for a little over a year, and the sequel is coming out at the end of this year called Trial of the Heart.
Oh, I like
And
that.
so, and that's available for pre-order on Amazon. So 60 is available, and Trial of the Heart is available for pre-order. And you can find all this at positivelyjoy.com and YvetteWalker.com.
You have been so clear. I really appreciate that because you've made it very simple for us to find you and to tap into all these resources that you have. Everything from, I love journaling. I love people that share, how to journal and all the devotionals, etc. You've just covered all the bases. I don't even have to ask you about it. That's awesome. And your podcast, I'm looking forward to connecting with you there. And your story today is definitely one that I know, as I mentioned a couple times already, people are going to relate to. So, in summary, is there anything you want to say to the audience?
Well, I mean, I love your story of hope. And I think hope and joy work together.
Yes, yes.
And so I would just like to say, and I would like to leave you with this encouragement that you can find joy, you can find hope.
Hmm.
And I would just say, there's Carol, like people like Carol and myself, we are out there, and also on my website there's free resources, and so I
Oh,
would
good,
encourage you
good.
to go there, look at the free resources, and just know that there are people out there. You're not alone. There are people out there
Right,
who
right.
share your story or some part of your story, and it will be okay.
Oh, I like that. Good summary. Excellent. And the bottom line, it will be okay. Thank you. And thank you so much for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.